February 13th to 2023, starting at 5:02. If we can please have the roll call.
Dr. Corbin,
Here.
Alana,
Here.
Bonnie,
Present.
Casey Mills is absent. David. See you. Chris. Here. Adam,
Hey, everybody.
Adrian. Don't see at the moment. Aaron, I saw you. in The chat, Sabrina,
Here.
thank you. Ally,
Here.
thank you. Suen. Here. Jonathan,
Here.
Matt. Let's try to, I think, rejoin the Zoom. I will mark him as present. Patty. Here. And Jessica.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, is that everybody? Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and move to public comment. Doesn't look like we have anybody in person for public comment. Do we have anybody on Zoom?
Nope.
Great, thank you. Let's go ahead and move to the approved January meeting minutes. Do we have? Go ahead, Suen.
In the packet we received, page 92 included the Budget Advisory Committee's letter to the city commissioners dated back in January last year, which is a little bit out of context. We were using that as a reference point, but then when it's included in the packet, it's out of context. If we can take it out, that seems to be better, or maybe there's an explanation that is what we used last year.
We can maybe discuss that during the chat. That's something that we want to do.
I don't think I understand the concern.
So there's a letter that's dated from January 2023, and we're not quite sure how it fits within the larger discussion within the packet. And so,
Which we're supposed to write a new letter.
Correct.
So,
Oh, okay.
so
That might have been my mistake. I thought that was the draft letter for this year.
no. Okay, so just to remove that from the
Yeah.
final agenda. Thank you. Others.
Just one amendment. I think that this is supposed to say Tuesday, January 9th instead of December 12th.
I will fix it.
Thank you. And I also saw a November community engagement working group report for the packet that might want to be removed. And then I have a follow-up question regarding our new working group. Have we settled on a name yet? Are we still working through that?
I don't believe there's a name, Adam.
No, I think the last draft was to make it longer, a couple paragraphs long, actually. We haven't settled on a name yet, but I can add that to our agenda for next time.
Sounds good. And Bonnie.
Thank you. Yeah, as long as we're doing these kinds of comments, I noticed that there was, since we had two BAC meetings, BAC meeting number 2 and number 3, they were both included in the amended packet, but I noticed that it didn't include the presentation deck from the BAC number 2, but only included for number 3.
Great. Is there a motion to accept the board agenda meeting minutes from January with all the friendly amendments discussed?
Recording in progress. I moved to accept the meeting minutes from January, the friendly amendments.
Working this out. It's a remix. Do we have a second? Okay. Any further discussion? All right, if we're gonna move forward.
I'm
with
just gonna note that Ally made a comment in the chat that she will abstain from the vote.
Thank
She wasn't
you.
present.
Great. All those who were present that want to vote to accept the January meeting minutes with the friendly amendments, please either raise your hand or say aye. Michelle can see you.
Aye.
Thank you. Did you get everybody, Michelle? Yes. Okay, any abstentions? We have Ally. Right, anybody against? Right, thank you so much, folks. Moving forward.
Sorry, Dr. Corbin, may I just say one quick technical housekeeping?
Yes,
If
please.
your name is coming up and that is not your name, or your display name is not your actual name, if you right click on your window and there is an option to hit rename. Otherwise, we might have to do a battle of the Todds and Tanya's.
I think we're okay with having two Todds and two Tanyas.
Clones.
Just
right?
FYI.
All right, it looks like it jumped a little ahead, so I'm gonna open it up for any general announcements. General announcements could be maybe thoughts that maybe don't necessarily fit into the agenda, but the board wants to bring up. Any activities you think the board would be interested in, this is the time and space to do so. Chris, go ahead.
I attended the public engagement for the Darcel Plaza, and it was really great to see everybody's and the community's ideas placed up on the designs. I know that a few other board members attended as well, so it was a great community engagement opportunity with various park partners present that engaged the community on their thoughts on the design process.
Sue-Lin, go ahead.
I'd like to follow up on that. It was a great event. That space at that corner, if parks can actually have a presence at that corner when the plaza is open up, I think it will be a great community kind of engagement opportunity, just have a park station there.
Addie, please go ahead.
I was unable to make it, but I just have a question. Was there any conversation about the fence? Because I've seen a lot of chatter on other.
Oh, can I respond?
Of course.
Oh, so as a board member, I had some conversations that I think I overheard some people conversing about that, but there wasn't as like tables in which to have that conversation. I think there were some comment cards on the design because they were folks were able to post comment cards on all of the design processes. So there were differing opinions that were on the post-its, but there wasn't a formalized conversation. It would be great if someone who was facilitating the event, I forget exactly who was facilitating it or whether it was the parks department, how they collated or all of the comments that were made on the designs to see what were the most common comments on all of the designs presented. But that was the method of community engagement that I saw. And I know that some other park members were there as well.
We had a conversation with Ross Swanson and Todd from ESU. And they like the idea to see if there are other opportunities to, it will transform the idea of the regular fence to something that is an opportunity for art fence. And that was a good conversation.
Wonderful. Looks like Matthew, you have your hand up. Are you adding to the conversation or starting a new one?
Adding to it, just to say thanks to Parks. Was really impressed by the level of sort of diverse engagement that allowed people to provide feedback. And I did chat with Ken, and Ken I think said he'd have a summary potentially available next month to share out of all the comments they had. So kudos to Parks. And yeah, it seemed like I was just there for an hour, but it seemed like there was a lot of excitement about the park design, and I don't think we'll ever reach unanimity on the fence or the non-fence. I think that's reflected here in the board and also in the feedback that Parks got at the session.
Thank you, board members, for going out and actually meeting community where they are, which is really important. So I appreciate that. Are there any other announcements? I'm gonna take this opportunity to circle back on the question that we may have, just so we don't lose it. And the question was regarding possibly getting a map of the bus stops at park sites, park and recreation sites. Just to make sure that that doesn't get hidden, especially when we're thinking about accessibility to parks throughout the system. I'm not sure if you can answer that, but it's something that we would love to see at a future meeting. Moving forward, unless there's any other announcements. Director's report with Director Wong.
Thank you, Dr. Corbin. So I'm going to start with some updates on the two work sessions that we had. We had both the Vibrant Communities Budget work session and the Natural Area Service Delivery Assessment work session that were held on Thursday, February 1st. The BAC received a near identical presentation, and I know that Bonnie and Claudia will provide an update on that momentarily, so I won't get into specifics. And we didn't receive as much direct feedback on the draft work plan as we would have liked at the City Council work session. But there was strong dialogue around natural resources in general. And so that was very robust and interesting. The core team, planning team has reconvened, and we're planning additional engagement from late February through April. So in addition to having advisory board representatives joined the board leadership and SME group. We, of course, just as a reminder, committed to coming back to the full board in March to update everyone on where we are. Dr. Corbin and I spoke before the meeting, and she will be identifying two representatives from the board to represent moving forward. So I'll let her talk about that when she's ready. I wanted to give a little update on some Parks Board business. We've had a lot of discussions held both at the full board and the Board Affairs Working Group around some procedural items. And so we sort of finally figured out how we're going to be moving forward. Moving forward, we'll be posting the board agenda at least 2 weeks in advance of upcoming Parks Board meetings. So that'll be just following our agenda setting meeting. Those will likely be in draft form because, as you know, things change. And then the working group meeting reports will now be included in the Parks Board packet and will be posted for public access. I'm saying this out loud to remind folks that it being timely in submitting them is really important. We're getting better every week. Every month we get better. And so I also wanted to remind working group chairs and co-chairs and staff who support the working groups to use the meeting report template that we created, and because it's an accessible document, and also to be mindful of including confidential information or information that is not yet ready for public consumption, because these documents will be in a public website. So I'll just pause there for a second, see if anyone has any questions. All right, I'll take a breath and continue. So government transition, there was a council item today, actually, that went to council regarding allowing the Bureau of Human Resources to offer employment agreements to interim deputy city administrators. This is a kind of signals a significant milestone in the transition. We anticipate that the various commissioners in charge of the different service areas will be appointing interim DCAs in the coming months. So we'll keep you informed as that moves forward. I wanted to also give you an update on our PSEF conversations. On February 2nd, the PSEF committee voted to recommend 24 of the 25 projects that bureaus proposed to them in late January. For parks, that includes the Mount Scott Community Center renovation for resiliency, converting gas-powered backpack leaf blowers to electric, the tree protection program, and the arborist trainee program. We spoke about all those programs last month, but they were officially approved by the PSEF committee. They now go to council through the budget process. And also at our last meeting, some board members asked about additional opportunities to partner with PSEF. I learned that there is an additional tranche of funding that has not yet been allocated. And the committee is meeting this week to discuss the process and parameters on how they're going to be proceeding with that next allocation. And again, I will keep the board abreast as we learn more. I wanted to also point out, I sent a summary report regarding our storm response. I don't know if folks got a chance to read it, but I just wanted to publicly express gratitude and pride of our team's response and the continued recovery efforts. Urban Forestry responded to well over 700 calls for service. We quickly pivoted to waive retroactive removal and replanting permit fees to lower barriers and assist property owners to move forward with dealing with the damaged property from downed trees. Our professional repair and maintenance services generated and responded to well over 200 work orders, including damages that closed several of our facilities for multiple days. And of course, our park rangers continued patrolling and assisting folks out of doors, and land stewardship staff cleared snow, ice, debris, and closed and dealt with closing multiple trails throughout our system. So even though it feels like it's over, it's not over. We're doing a lot of debris removal. We lost a multitude of large growth, old growth trees, in particular in Tabor Park. And we're working, it's just an interesting little tidbit. We're working to be able to reclaim some of that wood and reuse it to rebuild the shelter. So it's kind of an exciting project I wanted to share with the board. And that would mean, you know, milling some of the trees for lumber. So it's kind of like a little love note back to Tabor. And then I'm just gonna flag, I've forwarded to the board our response to the drone complaint that we've been hearing about every month for almost a year. And so the Portland Film Office is going to have all drone launches occur outside of parks from now on until they can create a policy and a procedure related to addressing the public concerns that have been brought to our attention. And so it's not completely resolved, but at least for the time being, we know that a policy is going to be put forth at some point. And in the meantime, we will not allow drones to be launched from our property. That's all I got.
Thank you, Director Long. Opening that up for the board, any questions or comments? Sue-Lin, please go ahead, and then I have Jonathan and then Adam.
I have a question about Mount Tabor Park. It was a horrendous collapse of trees and the shelter. Are there, and really great to be able to reclaim some of that wood. Is there any opportunity, maybe there can be a little bit more community engagement with soliciting community's idea about what a picnic shelter can be or should be, and make it more outreach opportunity to solicit ideas.
Yes, we have a developed park community coordinator that is specific to the east side, and she's in close contact with the Friends of Tabor Park. And they were almost immediate. We're asking like, how can we help? What can we do? So we'll keep them close as we move through the process, for sure.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue-Lin. Jonathan, did you still have a question or comment?
Yes, it's not related directly to the report, so I can wait till the end if there's other questions about items in
All
the.
right. Okay, thank you. Adam, please go ahead.
Great, thanks. Director Long, thanks so much for the report. I have one comment and one question. My comment is on page 8 of the packet, and that's just huge thumbs up, kudos, whatever you want to call it, for the work with Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport. That sort of training to coaches and volunteers is really invaluable, and I think the scale you're doing it at is pretty incredible. So I was really, really excited to see that that's still continuing. And my question is on page 9. It says under arts and culture that the Art Center was launching paid parking in one of their lots. And I'm curious if you could talk about, is that something that you see sticking around for a while? Is that a temporary measure? Is that something that we feel like we can reclaim some funding shortfall? And I'm just curious as to really what that means.
Yeah, I think I'll either defer to Todd or Maximo to talk about
Maximo, you want to go ahead?
Multnomah Arts Center page.
Sure, yeah, I could start us off. And so for many years, Multnomah Arts Center in kind of partnership and kind of collaboration with the Community Music Center had been looking at kind of additional sustainable funding models of which to explore through that extensive work. Parking at the Multnomah Arts Center, paid parking at the Multnomah Arts Center was elevated as a opportunity there to be able to kind of cover that through existing structure that we have through paid parking elsewhere in our park system. There are 3 parking lots there at the Multnomah Arts Center. And so some intention was made around, I believe it's just one of the west side parking lots there. The front parking lot and the main parking lot continue to remain free and available to patrons and community members. And so that one parking lot was identified for ongoing parking as part of that program going forward.
Thanks, Maximo. Appreciate it.
Is this, are you continuing this thread or starting another conversation? Just want to check in.
Well, it's related to the director's report, but it's not on the parking.
On this
portion.
topic, okay, thank you. All right. Thank you, Adam. And Lauren, go ahead.
I just wanted to let everyone know that the Mount Tabor shelter is a historic contributing structure. So we're not going to be able to vary significantly from that, likely.
Thank you, Lauren. Bonnie, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to both acknowledge the tremendous lift that the significant storm event created in terms of level of effort for staff and appreciate them for their work on that. But one thing I did want to understand a little bit better, some of the information I heard from community members, there was some concern about the decision to blanket close a lot of the park assets. And while certainly some were severely impacted, that didn't seem to be universal. And I wanted to kind of just ask, you know, is this a change in policy to make this kind of blanket closure decision? And is this something that's going to be occurring moving forward? Or can we be a little more granular in our decision making with respect to impacts on community members? You know, because I think by the time things were melted, I think people were feeling like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's 2 things. I'll start and Todd, there was no blanket closing of facilities. First, it was about having staff be able to get to facilities. And then it was our PRMS land staff and urban forestry staff were dealing with life safety issues in the parks. So it took us a while to get to the facilities to actually do assessments. And we had 19, I believe, facilities that were knocked offline, and that ran the gamut to a broken water line to MAC, which I think is still being repaired, roof leaks, failed heaters, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So it wasn't a blanket closure, may have felt that way for some community members, unfortunately. And so nothing about this storm was routine or regular. And it's certainly, I mean, we try very hard to keep our facilities open to serve the public as possible. But you know, we had staff, non-essential staff, who are asked to come and open facilities. So if they are unable to get to facilities as well, that impacts it. Todd, you want to add anything?
Yeah, just maybe on the, so that was kind of. As we're coming out of the emergency, I think what Director Long just said, at the beginning of the emergency, the mayor declares an emergency. And then basically says all non-essential staff, which includes our community center staff, unless they're operating a emergency shelter, not to report to work. And so then that in some ways then just closed many of our facilities. Charles Jordan remained open for a shelter. And then everything that Director Long said was like, the mayor was saying like workers could report back to work, but then our facilities weren't ready to open on those days because of storm damage. And we basically through that week, kind of starting from Monday through the week, each day there were more facilities that were being opened, and then like Mac that broke water line. Yeah, much longer.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Yeah, I was thinking more, because I think some of the social media posts, people were under the impression the way it was worded, it sounded like a blanket closure, and people were commenting that didn't see that as necessary. And I am talking about, you know, after the melts. I mean,
Right.
when, you know, even sidewalks were clear as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. I saw two hands come up, so Matt as well as Alana is this continuing on the same thread or are we starting a new conversation?
Just related thought.
Thank you. Matt, is it a related thought to that thread?
No, so go ahead, Alana.
It just sounds like there may be some tension in times of extreme weather between wanting to keep people off the roads and keep people home by not opening assets, both people who would be using those assets and staff trying to get to them. And also the benefits that community centers provide, which we've talked about ad nauseum on the board. And I just want to flag that potential tension so that as we talk about how we use our community centers in extreme weather events, we can make sure to pull that thread in and pull in the thread of things like this past weather event, though we hopefully won't experience something quite that extreme for a few years. I think there may be some threads we can pull in that could be relevant in less extreme weather events as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, not to underscore Todd's comment about the emergency declaration, but the cabinet.
Sorry about
But when we have staff who are categorized as non-essential, right? That is very closely tied to labor management
Yes.
agreements. And so, that often dictates how we operate. So, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, kudos to Parks for stepping up, and I think especially remarkable that there were no injuries in what was a really dangerous scenario. So kudos. My question is about whether the reports about the bond not being pursued are accurate. If that's the case, and if it is there a plan B that's known at this time, or is just a determinate push off to address those ongoing capital needs?
Like, you know,
I'm looking at Kelly, but Kelly can't tell that I'm looking at her.
oh,
I know. I'm like, do you want me to say something? Yes, I'm happy to respond. So the media reports were somewhat inaccurate. They were misleading at best, I guess. The headline was that Commissioner Ryan has abandoned or whatever is some dramatic word. And that is absolutely not the case. In fact, I had a conversation with Director Long and Todd today in which we have spoken about it in just a few briefings with the mayor and with Director Long and Todd. And I got clarification today from the commissioner that he is really interested in talking to the mayor, the chair of Multnomah County, and President Peterson from Metro about right sizing some of the previous measures that have already passed with voters that have collected an exorbitant amount of money and haven't been expended to the public's expectation at this point. And so he would like to talk with them a little bit about that, to right size those measures if possible, and then to consider going forward with the bond and definitely renewing the levy. Possibly this year, making an announcement this year, possibly next year. And what we're waiting to see is what happens in May with all of the local elections and just what the buzz is in the community. And also, we're still awaiting guidance from the governor. As the commissioner reminded me today, she said in a room full of 900 people in the Moda Center, no new taxes and no new bond measures would be allowed. And then we know that a couple have come to fruition in the last few weeks. And so we're still waiting to hear guidance and clarity from her office as well. So it's definitely not off the table. It's not something that we've ever said that it's off the table. And the commissioner is exploring and talking to folks, and we will continue talking to Director Long and Todd about opportunities and options. And as he reminded me today, we can't control the messaging from the media. So I do appreciate the direct question. Like, is that the truth? So thanks for asking.
Follow up? Thank you. Since I'm the next one, I have two questions. One is coming from me, and then the other one is coming from Casey, who was excused from the meeting today. So thinking about the PSEF opportunities, how is Parks rethinking maybe some facility fixes or asset fixes based on some of the damage that got had in this last severe weather event?
Well, let's backing up a moment, let's keep in mind that PSEF has very strong and clear criteria. We don't know what their focus and interest is going to be for the next tranche of funding. They have identified in the past an interest in creating resiliency hubs. And that is one of the reasons why the Mount Scott project was appealing to them, because it was also building off of a construction project that was already shovel ready. So that's always very appealing. And we have, I would say that the damage that occurred is directly related to our deferred maintenance issues. It's all connected. And so if we get, if PSEF is an opportunity for us to address some of those and it meets the criteria of PSEF, I think those are certainly fair game, as it were. But again, we've just got to wait for that guidance and see what the interest is. And there's been a lot of conversations, the community and the city around the appropriate allocation and use of PSEF funds. And so I'm very sensitive to that. Like, I don't want to ever be seen as, taking advantage of that or being overly opportunistic. We have had projects that really fit nicely into the criteria and have been really well received, and that we are implementing as they've as it's been prescribed for us to. So I feel like we've been a really good steward of the resources thus far. So we'll just wait to see what they're interested in funding next.
Thank you. And I have a follow-up question, because I think trees are super important. And so this is an and, not an or, but regarding thinking through shade infrastructure and how that could also be leveraged through, shading that has solar panels on it that can also produce, lighting at night. How are we thinking through these sort of more technological interventions that maybe the PSEF can bring new opportunities to parks, making it resilient in different ways?
I think that we've thought about those innovations ourselves generally, but not necessarily in relation to PSEF. So I don't think that connection's been made, but I'm fairly certain that PSEF it has and will be funding projects similar to that, just like out there in the private sector. So it's an interesting concept, and certainly, I'd be interested to learn more. We can always invite them.
Yeah, because I'm thinking the National Recreation Park Association always, whenever they have their conference, they always have all the goodies that are out in parks and things like that, and I'm wondering if they are starting to see that invention start coming to local municipal park.
Mm.
That's just something. to
No,
keep
great,
out
thank
there.
you.
Thank you so much, and it looks like Sabrina, your hand is up, and then I'll go to Casey's question.
Thanks. Yeah, my question is in regards to resilience hubs. I know that that's something that I've been hearing about a lot, particularly in East Portland. There's a few different groups in East Portland, or I don't know, coalitions that, we're kind of talking about that. I know BPS is talking about that. So I guess my question is, what kind of definition or model are we going off of? Are we just looking to PSEF to define that? Because I hear that term a lot and people have very different understandings of resilience hubs. And when I sat on a resilience hub something group for PSEF, that, there were very different thoughts of what that was coming from some of the PSEF team and some of the community members that they brought on. So I'm just curious, has that been thought through yet, or is that still a part of your kind of, we're waiting to get that direction?
Yeah, I really wouldn't know. That is a PSEF program that they've identified as a part of the overall approach and strategy. So we have not been asked to weigh in on that. And I do know that their intent was to create resilience hubs in the communities with private partners. So like, they weren't talking specifically about public facilities, although, like I said, the Mount Scott investment certainly falls in the category of creating a resilience hubs for the community. So again, if the board is interested, we could certainly have PSEF program staff come and do an overall presentation on the program and their approach. So to answer all the questions, I can't.
So with that said, can I quickly see the hands of folks who are interested in making that happen? Having PSEF, I guess, representative come to one of our board meetings. Hands up if you can show that. Looks like there's enough interest. Wonderful. So it does look like the board is interested, and so maybe through one of our agenda setting meetings, we accomplish that. So thank you so much. Jonathan, I have not forgotten about you. Go ahead and ask your question, and then since Casey is not here, I will ask his.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this one's, I guess this, connects to that can't control what's in the media, note from earlier. But anyway, the Red Tail site came up again with the baseball diamond project, and I understand that a lot of what they do is just showing strength, with the media eyewash. But if there is validity to that, is there long-term planning for, the loss of that open space, but also what, any revenue off of the sale of that site would entail?
Funny enough, that was also Casey's concern. So
Great.
it works out.
Is that a question? You want to take that one? Wake up.
Do it.
All right.
Knock it out of the park. though.
So the mayor's office is in the lead in negotiations around bringing Major League Baseball to Portland. And maybe this is another one where we have some information from their office we could share at a future board meeting. I think we can answer those questions, but we don't have that information yet today.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Todd.
Yeah. And just so everyone knows, Red Tail Golf Course is a piece of property that the city of Portland owns. Portland Parks and Recreation, of course, manages. That is part of our golf program. And we have a lease agreement there where we have an operator that manages the facility on our behalf. We do the maintenance there, but they manage a leasehold there.
Okay, and I'm just gonna add the missing piece, and it's in Beaverton.
Oh, sorry.
Okay,
I
sorry.
think it's Tiger, right?
No, it's
Beaverton.
Beaverton.
It's Beaverton. Sorry,
Yeah.
long day. That was the whole point of me speaking, actually.
According to Casey, it's 163 acres. Well,
Yeah.
according to what it is, it's, in Casey's notes. And the question also comes out to, would during these property sales, considering it's such a large piece of land and it's also seen as, you know, a place for wildlife to habitat. Would items like this come before the board before these negotiations happen? Because the board, as a public forum, just to have community members speak to this or address it. It's more of a procedural question around these sort of big negotiations and how the board can also help facilitate it or be a part of the discussion. Any thoughts on that?
I think ideally, yes. But as has been articulated, the mayor's office is taking the lead in these negotiations. We're sort of learning as we go. But I think offering that maybe through Kelly, through the commissioner's office, that the board has an interest in being a platform for public discussion, if there's an opportunity for that. I think that is a good next step if that's what the board would like. I know that the Golf Advisory Committee, we have a Golf Advisory Committee that is connected to our recreation services work. They've expressed interest in being a part of the conversations as well. So
And I think the primary objective here has been to bring Major League Baseball to the city of Portland. And that's been going on for probably at least actively in the last 6 or 7 years. So they started at a port facility, they've looked at Lloyd Center. And I think they've worked their way to Red Tail in Beaverton. So this didn't really start out as like a Red Tail deal.
So one question, and then I see your hand, Ally. Was an environmental impact study done as of yet on that property?
No, not that we're aware of.
Okay, so it's all in discussion.
I mean, there's a whole, it's zoned open space. So there's a whole land use process that we'd have to go through prior to any kind of development.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Ally, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just wondering on the topic of bringing PSEF in, I'm wondering if there are, right, because Parks it would be applying for money just like nonprofits and other government agencies, right? PSEF isn't beholden to us in any way. I'm wondering if there are specific questions folks have for PSEF, if that already exists in terms of what PSEF like in their action plan that we could provide to the board. I'm wondering about if we can answer those questions first before inviting someone in, just to see if that we can help them, help us in terms of saving time, or so we can better know what questions we have if we do bring a representative in.
Sounds good. So maybe organizing through our working groups and then submitting some language, questions, comments. And then making sure that we're tailoring the discussion for our board meeting. Does that sound appropriate, Ally?
We even just seeing, does that information exist on, they have a lot of information that's available for the public to look at on what their grant criteria is, what money is being allocated for what and how it all works. So I actually think a lot of our questions might be publicly available. So I guess I'm wondering what the questions are. Is that available, and are there gaps where it's not, and that's where it would be most helpful to potentially bring someone in?
I do like that suggestion. So basically doing some sleuthing on our own, and then I would say through the our working groups, compile questions, send them to me, and then we can move forward with what it would look like to invite them in and at what time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ally. We are almost we're a little off time a little bit, but are there any other questions regarding Director Long's report? Really good, robust discussion.
So
Sabrina, thank you. Please go ahead.
Thanks. I just had a comment. I just wanted to see if the parks leadership received a letter from Thrive East PDX. I know it got sent to the city. I'm backtracking a little bit. It's about the closing of warming shelters. I unfortunately wasn't a part of the development of that letter, so Rose was not on that. but I just wanted to bring it to people's attention, and I'm happy to drop a link in. I think that in addition to, like, I know that we as board members, have been interested in learning from the county around their role in that relationship. And so I think that's a group of community organizations and leaders who might benefit from some direct contact. They just said that it was sent to the city of Portland, but I know the city's huge, so I don't know, who received it and who saw it, and maybe some connection points can be made.
I don't recall seeing it, but that doesn't mean we didn't receive it. So we can do a little digging to find out.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments before we move to the working group reports? All right, moving forward, the Board Affairs Working Group, are there any questions or comments? All right, thank you, Board Affairs Working Group. Land Use and Infrastructure, any questions from the board or any comments from the working group? Thank you, Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group. We have the Budget Advisory Committee, which is the Financial Sustainability Working Group, and we have Bonnie as well as Claudia. We have set aside some time for you to discuss this.
Yeah, thanks very much, Corbin. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier on, well, during the corrections, I guess, we just finished the series of 3 BAC meetings for the spring bump. And I think the plan was Claudia was going to give a quick overview on content, and then I was going to give an update on where the letter is. Thank you, Sue Ann, for noting that the draft letter that was, or the letter that was included in the packet was actually the prior year's letter. The current letter is still being drafted because the 3rd BAC meeting was only 1 week ago today, which is why I apologize. The report only came in this weekend because I was waiting on the attendance list. So I'm going to turn it over to Claudio. I know he was intending to provide a quick overview of the content that was reviewed.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks for Bonnie and Dr. Corbin inviting me tonight. Normally, Bonnie does a great job of updating folks through the report, but I think there are a couple of slides that wanted to make sure that the whole board was saw this evening, just to sort of understand the bigger picture of Parks Finance as part of this budget request. I'll note that I'm not going to touch on the whole deck. It is in your packet, so feel free to review that. So I'm going to be trying to run my own slides here, so let's see how that goes. Share screen. Are folks seeing the slide?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to be flipping back between that and all right. So here we summarize some of the most significant impacts that we're addressing in this coming fiscal year 24-25 and beyond. So these 2 columns represent 2 pieces of downside information that we received from the mayor and then from the city budget office in the last week before the holidays. So this is still pretty fresh news. The first column on the left shows the 5% reduction that's required of all non-public safety general fund bureaus, so not police, fire, Portland, or the Bureau of Emergency Communications or 911. So that reduction was announced on December 18 in a memo from the mayor. And that second column shows the impacts of to the parks levy based on the property tax forecast that we received from the city economist and the city budget office a few days later on December 21st. So the reduced forecast is the result of property tax compression, which is really the way that measures 5 and 47 relate to each other. It sort of creates downward pressure on property taxes, particularly for local option levies. So and really, according to the city economist, the main driver here is downtown commercial properties, some of which are experiencing between 50 and 75% declines in real market value. So the way compression works is that when real market value drops and approaches assessed value, you get compression. And the first things that are compressed are local option levies. And so they're, like I said, they're particularly susceptible. So the big takeaway here is that between the general fund cuts and the compression loss, we're looking at over $10 million ongoing gap over the next several years. So, so besides the managing the impacts of those, we've got a couple of other issues. Obviously, I think we mentioned it earlier. The first is renewal of the levy so that collections and the services that they provide would continue in 2026 and beyond. Obviously, we are optimistic about this successor resource, but it does represent a significant risk to the forecast. So I wanted to make sure that that's still on people's minds. And as you know, we continue to have a large and growing deferred major maintenance liability, and we talked about bond opportunities and planning earlier, so I won't hit on that too hard. We do have a bright spot in our outlook, and that is the Portland Clean Energy Fund. So we've talked about that a bit as well. That and recent investments are really going to expand, particularly urban forestry services through the Equitable Tree Canopy program, as well as the apprenticeship program in urban forestry. We also talked about a couple of the one-time projects, Mount Scott energy efficiency and the conversion to electric leaf blowers. So while we are seeing a contraction of available parks levy resources and general fund reductions, we're also seeing some significant expansion of investment, particularly in trees in the urban canopy. So diving into the impacts of compression loss and those general fund cuts, I want to start by taking a look at the long-term forecast for the parks levy from November. I'll note that this forecast assumes that renewal of the levy at the current mill rate of 80 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. So this was our November forecast before we learned about the general fund reductions or the compression of the parks levy. Orienting you to this picture looks complicated. It's actually hopefully simple. The green bars above the zero line are local option tax revenues. The orange bars below the zero line are expenses. The red line is the net of those two things. And so as the red line drops below the zero, expenses exceed revenues. And finally, the yellow line is fund balance. And as you can see, even before we get the downside news from December, we had some work to do over the next 7 years to close gaps and reach balance. Another just key assumption to mention that's included in this forecast is that the parks levy and not the general fund picks up the cost of running and maintaining new assets. So for those that have been around for a while, the general fund used to regularly pick up the cost of operations and maintenance of new assets as part of the passage of the levy. We made the commitment to fund operations and maintenance with the levy. That's taken a lot of pressure off the general fund over the last several years, but that assumption is one of the drivers of the long-term imbalance. I'm going to pause for a second. I think I see Sabrina's hand.
Yeah, thanks. I had a question from your last slide.
Yeah, sure.
I was wondering if there's any overlap between the bullet point that says 600 million repair and maintenance gap and the PSEF investment expected to increase in terms of the tree canopy. Is there any overlap there or any anticipated overlap, or those are two separate things? The tree canopy that we're talking about and urban forestry is like new expenses, or?
Yeah, so the tree canopy investment is our new expenses. Generally speaking, trees and urban canopy are not included in the repair and maintenance gap. That is entirely built assets. I know that folks are working on, we're hoping to be able to quantify the deferred maintenance for our green assets, but that 600 million plus is just physical assets, or rather built assets. So with regard to additional PSEF investments, I think we're, as the director has said earlier, we will, we've been good partners with them. We've been submitting our requests as, along with, as they've had rounds of funding. And we'll continue to look for opportunities to address the repair and maintenance gap through using PSEF. And it's really going to be very dependent on on how they utilize those funds and sort of address future rounds of funding. So.
Thank you.
And Claudia, do you want to just, since we're on that topic, just go through briefly, or I can, on the PSEF projects that are under consideration?
Sure, if you want to touch on those, yeah.
So we, Commissioner Rubio announced these in late 2023, so they're still being reviewed by the PSEF committee, need to go to city council for approval. $6.2 million for Mount Scott Community Center renovation and resiliency project. So that is related to the 300 million. Sabrina, to your question, $1 million for arborist tree training program. So not related to the 600 million. $1.6 million project to replace gasoline powered backpack leaf blowers with battery powered units. So again, a new, that wouldn't be part of that 600 million, but the Mount Scott investment is related to it.
And then really quickly, I see Aaron, your hand is up. Do you have a question regarding the same thread?
It's the next slide, so I can, if anyone has anything on that exact one, no.
Go ahead.
Well, Claudio, I haven't talked to you in a while. You know I'm gonna have questions. So I guess I'm wondering, on your earlier slide, you leave it on this slide, but on your earlier slide, you had kind of projected revenue declines for general fund and levy. But on this slide, if I'm looking at it right, it looks like we have actual dollar increases. So am I understanding, is it that the actual dollars are increasing, but not, or but
Yeah,
maybe
good,
not
good,
keeping
good.
pace with inflation, so that's why you have a projected decrease? Is it that, or what's going on there?
Yeah, no, great question. And actually, I'm gonna, it's sort of a preview to the next slide. So this was, as I mentioned, this was the forecast before those two pieces of information. But what I think you'll see is that the green bars, they shrink because of the compression forecast. And the orange bars grow because of the general fund cut. So you're right. Right now, we anticipate. So typically, property taxes in Oregon generally, and Portland particularly, grow at around 4%, kind of like clockwork. And that's because there is such a wide gap, generally speaking, between assessed value and real market value. And so what the dynamic that you typically get is that properties increase by 3% every year as their assessed value grows by 3%, approaching but never reaching that real market value, which tends to run ahead of it. Does that make sense? And then you get an extra 1% on top of that, typically just from new development. So we count on about 4% growth in property taxes in our forecast, and what we got was considerably less. We'll see that shrinkage in the green bar in a second. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Let me see if I don't think I had any other notes for this slide, so why don't we move on to that next slide? So you can see this is the after picture. So revised in early January with that general fund constraint and the compression impacts added in. So compression is, the compression is reducing, like I said, reducing the size of the green bar, less revenue, and the general fund reduction puts more costs on the parks levy, increasing the orange bar. And so the consequence there is that the net expense line shifts down and the balance line decreases faster.
So can I ask a clarifying question for those that may not be as literate when dealing with this information? So are we dealing with both inflation issues with the general fund being consistent and now being reduced at the same time? We're also dealing with compression issues because the reduction in levy funding. And so it sounds like across the board, parks are being asked to do a lot more with a lot less.
I think that, you mentioned inflation. Inflation is something that we do work into our forecast. I'll say that inflation for the last couple of years has certainly been a bit faster than we originally anticipated. I think we've had historically high levels for the last couple of years. So that, that was affecting our forecasts. But I think that the two big new pieces of information, you've got that general fund reduction, which is, for, like I said, for all non-public safety bureaus, is really necessary to balance the overall city budget and to identify, I think that they're looking at lower than expected tax revenues, but more importantly, we've got some big cost shocks associated with the new form of government, as well as a lot of one-time costs that at the city level that had been funded with pandemic relief, and so they're looking to backfill some of those or reduce services. So a lot of choices being made at the citywide level that are requiring that 5% general fund reduction. So it's those two impacts really that are changing our forecast pretty dramatically.
Maybe go back 2 slides if you could. Is it? We got the slides, or go back to one more. There you go. Those are the 2 big drivers. The general fund, which is the 5%, the first column, and then the second one is really being driven by the lower market value of downtown real estate.
But the general fund is being reduced now, but it's been on a trajectory for maybe decades of being 5 million, is that correct? So the spending power has been reduced through inflation over the years, and then now you're dealing with an additional reduction.
Do you want me to
That's
take a
been
crack at it,
being asked.
Claudio, or do you want to do it?
Yeah, if you got.
Yeah, so like what he was saying is general fund generally, because of both, we've been in a growing city and the property values have been going up. We've been on a 4% increase collection rate. But our biggest cost is personnel. And over the years, it's been between 5 to 9% a year. So we automatically have a gap structural, and that's not unique to parks. It's pretty much almost all public agencies in the state of Oregon that are on property tax dependency. And then now we've got a downturn in the economy and the real estate market. So it's got 2 problems going on.
So with that said, what would support look like either from the board or from community members that really treasure our parks, and how can they support parks would be the question.
Well,
Lottery.
Sales tax. Yeah, so in the very short term, meaning like this calendar year, Commissioner Ryan is grappling with his public policy decision about what to support. Bonds and levies have historically been what have gone along with the general fund contribution to parks. That's been true for our whole history. We're going to come up on a renewal of a levy that, unless we want to cut 1/3 of the operating budget, needs to be renewed prior to May 2026. So that's one advocacy point. And then the other is we have the $600 million major maintenance backlog, of which included in that is all of our ADA transition investments as well. And so we have those 2 problems to solve. It's a bit of a sequencing depending on where there's political support, both at the elected level and the community. But those 2 things is what we call get to a sustainable future. Otherwise, we're all going through over the coming years a rationalization process. You want to go through to that bar chart again? So we need to manage into this new revenue and reducing those expenditures. I mean, we're showing you what will happen. Obviously, that can't happen. So we're going to have to work with the community to bring a balanced budget. And that means reduction of services over time. And that's not fixing the major maintenance backlog. So that's kind of what we're faced with.
Don't want the message to get lost in
Sure.
some of the numbers here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually that's a good transition to the next sort of and the last point that I wanted to make is that, in approaching, developing an approach to gap closing, you know, we're looking at the mayor's guidance memo number 2, and where he really asked us to provide options for spending down Parks levy. You know, having a balance of nearly $60 million in the levy gives us the opportunity to be really thoughtful and deliberate around gap closing. And so looking to engage our stakeholders, including this group, more fully and allowing us to manage that gap over the next several years rather than making a hard pivot now. But, you know, another advantage to not making that hard pivot is that we can adjust those gap closing targets in the event of any upside in the levy, right? One thing about tax compression is that it happens quickly, but it also gets released pretty quickly because, like I said, it's on a property by property basis, and as soon as the real market value crosses over a certain line, that compression goes away almost immediately. So, so really, you know, we're going to be working with division managers in the coming months to identify options that minimize impacts to service. You know, with a focus on efficiencies, as we've been directed by the mayor, but nonetheless, we really do anticipate reductions in service levels that were originally planned with the levy, given some of these impacts. So we'll be bringing that back to stakeholders and city council over the next budget cycle. So that was really all that I wanted to bring to folks. Let me see if I stop the share. Sorry, by the way, I normally am on camera. My camera is on my progressively failing laptop. It's not working. So.
Well, thank you, Claudio. Bonnie, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so thanks, Claudio. I'm glad you were still able to share. I just wanted to talk briefly about the letter but really I don't have to say much because most of the issues were already discussed. You know, the key points that are going to be stressed, I think, in the BAC letter. So in this way, staff did a really good job of sort of identifying these key points, these key financial issues. One being, you know, PSEF as an opportunity with the higher levels of revenue than were originally expected. And thank you, Ali, for pointing out that, you know, even though the specific priorities of the PSEF committee aren't 100% clear, you know, the criteria for PSEF eligible types of investments are clear, right? So things like resilience and things that are going to contribute to clean energy generally. So for us, you know, the focus being on trees, resilience, and then retrofits like what's happening at Mount Scott. The other thing that we wanted the BAC heard was with respect to the new city governance structure, thinking about the new administrative positions, and even though the cost sharing associated with those isn't clear as of yet, the BAC really wanted to underscore the Bureau's priorities on retaining service delivery and ensuring access for community members. And then sort of that underlying issue of the deferred maintenance, which, you know, was for so long $500 million and is now been estimated at 600 million. And as Todd pointed out, in addition to just all the regular major maintenance that is behind, so much of it is ADA accessibility. So really important to ensure access for our community members. So thank you to Alana and our friends at Labor and the Urban Forestry Commission who are going to be drafting the letter. And it will be provided. I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to review it, but the BAC is going to review it and submit it as part of the Bureau's package this week, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Are there any questions or statements from the board? Thank you again, Claudio and Bonnie. Moving to the Community Engagement Working Group, Sabrina, any comments or are there any questions from the board?
I just want to uplift that we wanted to invite Melody and the equity team into the full board meeting to present on the work that they're doing. So I'll be working with probably the Board Affairs Working Group on the appropriate timing for that. But I think that feeds into, you know, the ADA work that is tied into the maintenance and repair backlog. That's just one of the things that they're doing. And so I think it'd be great for us as a board to know what they're up to and how we can support their work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sabrina. I think maybe we should also like make sure that we take care of home first. And so maybe looking at our own meetings and making sure that our meetings are accessible to all of our community members, considering what 26, a quarter of our population are considered to be under that large umbrella of disabled. So we can start at home and hopefully we can be a good model for other places within the city. So thank you so much, Sabrina. Moving towards, well, Adam, please let me know if this is the working name. So we have Recreation, Arts, Culture, and Nature Working Group. Any comments from the working group or any questions from the board? Right, thank you so much. Moving forward with the Portland Parks Foundation report with Jessica Green. Thank you for coming.
Hi all, thanks for having me. I sent in an update in last minute fashion, but what I do want to point out in the report that I sent out today, there's a lot of links in there to programs that are either active right now or opening up in March, including our volunteer award, our emerging leader award, and our small grants program. So again, I invite all of you to take a look at those programs and please send them out to your networks. There's also a link in there to our open development manager position. So please also share that with your networks, and I'm available to connect with anybody who's interested. On the project side of things, the elk fountain is moving along. We hope to actually have the design ready to gift over to the city by the end, as early as the end of this week. So I will be drafting a release on that and reaching out to Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner Mapp's office on some press release quotes just on that exciting milestone. We do have our design lead who is superstitious and doesn't like to celebrate anything until it's back in place. But as I said, it is a big milestone to be finishing the design work. And I'm talking with the Water Bureau about kind of next steps and timeline and making sure we're still on track for a return of the elk by the end of 2024. Our playground campaign in partnership with PPNR is moving along. I put in the notes that we have 3 playgrounds. We're currently in our silent phase and kind of kicking that into full gear of Raymond Park, Portland Heights Park, and George Park. And so we are moving in on that. And then we'll be doing some additional community engagement work with PPNR and the kids outside at George Park. Those are kind of our 2 big projects. And that's what's happening at the foundation right now.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Opening the floor to the board. Are there any questions or comments? Bonnie, I have you down.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you for your report, Jessica. And I am not superstitious. So I just wanted to congratulate Jessica. I noticed that she is now officially the Parks Foundation Executive Director. And even though it's not being publicly announced, unless there's somebody listening in right now on our webinar situation. So congratulations, and I'm delighted you'll be stepping into your new official position.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yes, so I put that in there. I mean, it's just we haven't done the full announcement. We'll send that out next week, but it's nice to be able to tell people like all of you in person. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, for saying that. And Jessica, we're looking forward to working with you more in the future. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for your report. And moving forward, we are at the Anti-Displacement Action Plan with Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. So we have Tom Armstrong and Robin Johnson Craig. You want to please come on up?
Dr. Corbin, so Robin Johnson Craig is joining us virtually and she is with Parks. And Tom, if you want to introduce your colleagues.
Yeah.
to Everyone, that would be great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Armstrong. I'm a supervising planner at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I manage our housing and economic policy team and have been leading our work on the anti-displacement action plan that I'll talk about this evening. With me here tonight is Patricia Diefendorfer, our chief planner, and Julia Michelle, who's an economic planner on my team and doing some of this work.
Thank you for being here. You two want to sit side by side?
Come to the big kids table.
Yes.
Please.
There's room.
It's a team, right? We're the biggest, this is a small distance.
Yeah.
We don't need to be on the outskirts. So. Thank you.
We have the presentation, or is Robin doing?
Yeah, I don't know, if Robin or Michelle.
Robin, are you able to share? Otherwise.
I am here. My camera has been on off, but I just turned my camera on. If you can you see me? Because my screen says it's just dark.
You are dark.
Yes.
I am dark.
Yeah.
So I was just putting in the chat that I was having difficulty. So I was going to trying to leave and come back. Tom, are you able to share your screen?
No, we'll take care of it on this end. Michelle will
Okay.
do it.
May I ask which presentation are we showing first? Is it the anti-displacement?
I believe Tom's is first.
Just tell us when to advance slides.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, why don't we go to the next slide? So it's always helpful to start off talking about what we mean by displacement. And in this case, we really are focused on what we call economic displacement, which is when when people or businesses are forced to move because they can no longer afford a neighborhood. And a lot of our work to date has really been focused on residents. Although we acknowledge that, there are business displacement, cultural, institutions replacements, especially when, the neighborhood changes and, businesses that were relying on a customer who are no longer there or have to travel far to find the business, that changes the dynamic. So, but a lot of this work and what I'll talk about is really focused on residents and primarily around housing costs being the primary driving factor of displacement. Next slide, please. Just a little, this work has been informed by previous work that not only we've done at the city and at the Bureau, but also what's been done in the community and drawing from a lot of community plans like the People's Plan and learning from those documents that helped inform our work. And it is really part of a continuing conversation with the community and very much in a learning mode. And, this isn't just work that it's work that's being led by BPS, but also includes a lot of other city bureaus, especially those that really kind of fall into the community development and infrastructure investment bureaus. So we've been working with Prosper Portland and the Housing Bureau, Transportation, Parks, BES. So a lot of what would generally fall under the category of community development. Next slide, please. And so this sort of broad approach to anti-displacement, we've really been focusing on 3 different elements. One is what I call an investment framework, which I'll get into in a little bit. But it's really about a better coordinated approach between all of the city bureaus in how we approach and think about anti-displacement work. The second element is a little more focused on BPS, and that is developing an action plan. Really that is part of our strategic plan and our other work that really identifies a future work program for us that can elevate anti-displacement and equitable development in our planning and zoning work. And really model that for what other bureaus might do and how they organize their work programs. And finally, the third element is working with the Anti-Displacement PDX Coalition in providing community support and capacity building for that organization. That organization got its start in 2015 as part of our comprehensive plan update. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a future slide. But really after it sort of is a ongoing effort in terms of the community that builds off of that comprehensive plan policy work. And we've been supporting that work to sort of help keep that coalition going and identify community priorities that can, again, help inform our work. Next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit about the investment framework, and this really relates to why we're here tonight and to talk about how it relates to the North Portland Aquatic Center as an project example. But this investment framework really came out of comments from the community about the city needing to be more coordinated around how we approach anti-displacement, especially as it relates to different types of investment projects that the city is making. And I use investment here rather broadly. That can be a physical infrastructure investment. It can be a program investment. It can be a planning project in terms of investing staff time and resources towards. So it really is broadly defined, but what we want to get to is a framework where, again, it gives us confidence to move forward with small projects that may not have as great an impact in terms of displacement impacts. And it gives us a sort of a direction on how to approach larger projects that may have more of an impact. And really, again, help get all bureaus on the same page in terms of how we approach these projects. And a way to set community expectations on what they can expect from city bureaus as we approach these different investment projects. I really want to acknowledge up front that we have some really difficult challenges. We want to continue to invest in our communities. We don't really have a good way to do a sort of a one-for-one mitigation or offset of those impacts that may be associated directly with a project. We have more of a citywide approach, especially to housing issues and housing affordability and affordable housing. And so there is a tension there between investing in community and mitigating displacement impacts that we really are trying to work through. This investment framework helps us make more informed decisions. And so there really is a couple of components to that. Next slide, please. The first component is one that BPS has led, and that's really thinking about where we are making that investment and who is likely to be impacted by that investment. this economic vulnerability assessment builds off of work that we've done with Professor Lisa Bates at Portland State. It really is designed to be a high level, quick indicator of who might be at risk. And we've worked to identify really 5 different demographic characteristics that when you begin to layer those together in an index, really begins to indicate where the most vulnerable people in Portland live. And what you see here, and this map is available online as part of the Portland Maps gallery. But what you begin to see here is the darker blue areas are the areas of the city that have the most economic vulnerability risk, which is the combination of BIPOC residents, particularly Black and Indigenous residents, housing cost burden, which is households that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing, and education attainment. That is particularly looking at adults who have less than a 4-year college degree, and then finally, that should be adjusted median household income. So looking at where the lower income households are in the city, and we, create this index or this score that really begins to help inform, who's most at risk. And I'll get into a little bit more detail when it comes to the North Portland Aquatic Center a little bit in a few slides. Next slide, please. The other part of this is what kind of investment is being made. Is it a large investment? Is it a small investment? Is it maintenance? Is it a new amenity, a major change? And really looking at that type of investment. The other one that we quite haven't got out into or solved for, but we know is out there, is also beginning to look at the cumulative impact of, I'm making a parks improvement, I'm making a transportation improvement. We have a greenway from BES, not only layering on that cumulative impact and not just looking at the individual project itself. Next slide, please. And so the basic framework is we have a location here on the right-hand side on the y-axis that may have varying degrees of vulnerability. We have a size of project or an impact of project going left to right on the x-axis. And really what this is saying is if you have a smaller project in a lower or less vulnerable area, really kind of go forward and make that, go forward with that project. And that as you get into the larger projects that are in the more vulnerable neighborhood, you need to stop and pause and think about it and really, especially engage other bureau partners like the Housing Bureau, like BPS, like Prosper Portland, to really do sort of deeper thinking about who might be impacted, what other programs we might be able to bring to bear, and to really make informed decisions about that project. The best example to date in the way this has worked out has been the 82nd Avenue transit project, where early on we knew this project was coming. We could see from the map that there are many vulnerable communities, especially between 82nd Avenue and I-205. And at that time, we were able to take advantage of federal money that through the ARPA program and allocate money towards both residential and business, early residential and business stabilization efforts. That has been able to continue with Prosper Portland now leading a community discussion about future tax increment finance districts that may be able to fund affordable housing and other community improvements and support. So that's really has been a sort of a model about how this can work in a decision-making process as a project develops. Next slide, please. So at BPS, some of the things that we're looking at in terms of an action plan, you know, we started with what we call a foundation report, where we really looked at all of the citywide through all the bureaus, the different policies and programs that we have to support anti-displacement and equitable development. And from there, we use that as a jumping off point to begin to explore, well, what is BPS's role in advancing equitable development, and what would that look like? Next slide, please. And some of that is sort of promoting home ownership, looking at exclusive neighborhoods and how we can expand housing opportunity and economic opportunity in those exclusive neighborhoods. We have programs that have begun to you know, acknowledge cultural assets for different communities that have been underserved or under-recognized. We have a new legacy business program coming online that we got a federal grant to support. Next slide, please. And we're also looking on the economic side. We've identified, you know, support for home-based businesses. We have sometimes very complex and daunting zoning codes around what you can do in your home. Some of those were relaxed during the pandemic. And now we're looking at models on how we can build upon that to support small businesses. And then again, we're working with the Housing Bureau and have been working closely on increasing affordable housing through the inclusionary housing program and through density bonuses for affordable housing projects. So those are some of the projects that are on our work program that we're looking at. Next slide, please. And so the work that we've been doing with the Anti-Displacement PDX Coalition has been led for the last couple of years by Unite Oregon. They have been able to hire a community organizer and work with a coalition of community groups, particularly, and also fund some sub-grants to key groups that are part of their steering committee, such as Imagine Black, the Black Community of Portland, and the Portland Harbor Community Coalition, to really build capacity in that organization and to try and develop and identify community priorities. We have had 4 years of city and metro grant support for that work. That phase of the work is wrapping up, and we're expecting them to sort of issue a report or an action plan of agenda of their own in the next few weeks that will again help inform our work at the city. All right, next slide, please. I'd like to just sort of show you an example of how this framework can work with a project like the North Portland Aquatic Center. You know, early on in the project when the Parks Bureau was looking at different sites, Robin reached out to me and we held a couple of meetings to talk about, you know, what the different sites and what the different impacts might be. And subsequently we've done additional work that can help and inform the decisions around that. What you see here is North Portland, the service area for that aquatic center. I forgot to put a little star on the map, but the green square in the middle is Northgate Park. and you, right there where the icon is, and you can see that it falls in a, what I would term as a highly vulnerable census tract. Our assessment is largely based on census data, and it is census tract based. And what you can go from there is you can click on that census tract and get a lot of basic demographic information. Next slide, please. And this is the kind of information that comes up that really shows, you know, how vulnerable the people that live in that census tract can be. And what you see in the left-hand column is that census tract data itself and how it compares to citywide averages. On the right-hand side, and you can see that Northgate tract really has a high concentration of people of color, of Black and Indigenous Portlanders, a high degree of people with lower education attainment, higher cost burden, lower average household income, also a high number of youth living in that tract itself. And this really is designed in the way this system was set up with Dr. Bates was, you know, this is a starting point. This really raises a red flag. And what it's designed to initiate was what we call a drill down analysis, to dig deeper, to understand just more than these high level indicators, what is going on in the neighborhood. And so that's some of the work that Julie has done and my team has done that we can share with you. Next slide, please. And so when we really look at what's going on in the Northgate tract and compare it to the North Portland service area, which is that middle column, and then to Portland as a whole, is that you can see, you know, in terms of home ownership and renters, you know, the Northgate tract has a little bit higher home ownership rate than the citywide, maybe a little bit less than North Portland itself. You know, again, there may be a little bit more, it looks like there's a little bit more multifamily apartments in that tract, in that neighborhood. But when we dig a little bit deeper, we see that there's quite a bit of regulated affordable units, and that you know 58% of the multifamily units in that tract are regulated affordable units that might offer a little bit more stability than you might find in some of the other tracts where the unregulated rental is more susceptible to the market impacts or the displacement pressures that might come from a new community amenity. Next slide, please. Other things that we found in our work, this is recent residential home sales. The darker line on top is the market area to the right for the interstate corridor. The lighter line at the bottom is the St. John's market area where the Northgate tract falls under. The dashed line in the middle is the citywide average for the city of Portland. And you can see that these two market areas really sort of track with the city as a whole. We're not seeing huge spikes in appreciation that might indicate an overly hot area. You see a little bit of that in the interstate tract over there in the sort of 2014, 2015 period. I think what you see here, and one of the challenges we face with all of this is that we're always looking backwards, right? The data, especially the American Community Survey data, is up to 5 years old. We have a real challenge with getting sort of identifying real-time indicators, early warning indicators that could really help us get ahead of the game Next slide, please. This is some data on rents, and this is rent per square foot for multifamily apartments for the last 4 years. Again, you can see, for the North Portland service area, the rents are running a little bit less than the citywide average, but generally tracking sort of the citywide, and again, not seeing huge spikes that indicate increasing pressure on housing costs and that might lead to increased displacement. Next slide, please. And again, we're seeing this with vacancy rates for rental apartments. Tracking more or less with the citywide averages right around 8%. That's in general terms of a fairly healthy vacancy rate. It's when you see vacancy rates down in the 5, 4, 3% that you really begin to see increased pressures on rents and a really tight market that triggers a lot of new development. I have one more slide here and then we can take questions. So next slide, please. This is a new emerging analysis that we're doing that really looks at not so much at the demographics, but at the physical housing stock and trying to identify how much of that housing stock is at risk of displacement. And in this, we're looking at sort of older homes, rental homes, unregulated rental homes that may have lower property values. And again, where do we see those aligning? And so, a minimal risk may have 1 or 2 of these characteristics. A moderate risk may have 3, and a high risk might have 4 or more of these characteristics aligning in our analysis. And again, for the Northgate tract itself, we're seeing, some of the units falling into that moderate risk category as a share. It's not, it's on par with the rest of the North Portland area. So again, not seeing a high degree of risk in that tract, in that immediate area of that project. So I think I'll pause there, and that sort of has encompassed our work. Again, it is a work in progress, and it is part of a continuing conversation about how to do this better and how to make more informed decisions as we go forward.
Thank you so much. Before I open the floor to the board for any questions or comments, we are at 6:45, which is when we open it up to public comments. I don't believe we have anybody in person. Is there anybody online that would like to make a public comment?
And I'll just add, Robin Johnson Craig does have the second half of the presentation.
Yeah.
Hopefully she can do it speedily because we only have a few minutes.
Okay, and she is on, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful.
I am here.
So
Hopping out
go-
of Zoom and going back did not support my visual access. This is, it's always something new. I've never had this one before, so I apologize. I can't see you in person. I've sent the presentation to Michelle and Lauren if they could share their screen, because I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to share my screen if I don't have video, but let's try. Can you guys see some folks laying in the water?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
that worked. My name is Robin Johnson Craig, she, her, hers. I'm the PPNR Capital Project Manager for the new North Portland Aquatic Center, and I'm here to provide a little bit of an overview and follow up from the information that Tom just shared. So we are here to talk about PPNR's mission and how Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland, the strategic framework, which includes the revised mission and vision, values and equity and anti-displacement, anti-racism commitment, aquatic service goals for North Portland and our equity goals, and how this relates to anti-displacement. In order to address the questions about anti-displacement, it would be helpful to address why we have committed to building a new aquatic center in North Portland. And of course, this is reinforced by our mission. So our mission is to help Portlanders play and providing safe places, facilities, and programs which promote physical, mental, and social activity. Our mission increases the wellness of our residents and the livability of our city. And overall, we accomplish this through establishing, safeguarding, and restoring the parks, natural areas, and public places, developing and maintaining excellent facilities and places for public recreation, providing dynamic recreation programs, and partnering with the communities we serve. PPNR as an organization is committed to equity and to be an anti-racist bureau. And one of the reasons to build an aquatic center in North Portland foremost is to serve our underserved community members who do not have access to the life-saving swimming lessons. And in the spirit of time, I'm not going to read all this information, but it's provided to you as a PDF and also in your briefing document. So I'm just going to keep going. Our level of service is a metric used by parks providers to measure how well a community is served with access to a variety of assets and to identify areas where additional assets should be added to provide a uniform set of experiences to all households to achieve greater equity. PPNR's level of service goal for full service community centers is to provide a full service community center within 3 miles of every resident. Our 4 full service community centers are noted and shaded in blue. Diagrammatically, the area shaded in orange represents the projected North Portland Aquatic Center service area at the Northgate Park site. The new aquatic center will serve approximately 17,984 dwelling units, not currently served by PPNR's level of service metric. The goal for building the new aquatic center is to fill a historic gap in equity serving North Portland residents. I just wanted to highlight the neighborhoods that make up the North Portland community that we are intending to serve. And then I wanted to talk about a little bit in order to understand those neighborhoods and those community members is to further understand the North Portland Peninsula population and demographics. So we're providing a little bit of a comparison tool from our GIS mapping using the census block groups estimates from the American Community Survey from 2016 to 2020 to compare to the new ACS, which is from 2018 to 2022. So some of this information is a little bit of a follow-up and a repeat of information that Tom shared. So our total population in Portland dropped. The total population in Portland dropped from 650 to 646,000 people. In the 3 mile service area for Northgate, the estimated individuals dropped from 47,000 roughly to 45,000 for an overall decrease. It's highlighted in gray. With the overall population decrease, there was what's interesting, there was a 3.3% increase in the BIPOC individuals in the service area, highlighted in yellow. And in addition, there was a 1% increase in the number of children under 18, and residents living in poverty decreased by a little less than 2%. We also looked at the half mile service area. And again, I feel like I need to race through this information, but there was an overall increase of BIPOC individuals in the half mile service area from roughly 4,000 to 4,118, highlighted in yellow. And also there was a decrease in the number of children in the half mile. And the residents living in poverty decreased, also highlighted in green. As Tom alluded, we spent some time working with Tom and the Housing Bureau and PBOT's equity team to look at anti-displacement and what the impact of these 3 sites had on what it might have on the community members that live there. We know that market speculation will occur regardless in the North Portland Peninsula, regardless of the actual, any one of these 3 sites. Our charge to build a new aquatic center centered on filling this gap, of course, to provide equity and access to aquatics programming. And through our discussions with Tom and others on site selection as it related to anti-displacement, we heard loud and clear that the best approach to anti-displacement and gentrification in the North Portland area was locate the site directly in proximity to the populations that it was intended to serve and where existing affordable housing units are highest. We, of course, coordinate closely with the Housing Bureau to update this plan graphic to illustrate the concentration of existing and proposed affordable housing units in proximity, in the half-mile proximity to the 3 sites. We learned from the Housing Bureau that Northgate and University Park had the highest amount of affordable housing units. Again, placement of the Aquatic Center facility would further underscore that we're targeting the communities with an equity lens, and our best strategy to support anti-displacement was to place the facility where there is the highest amount of stabilized housing. Just following up on Tom's information, and this is might be a little small for you to read at your distance, but we can see the market rate housing in North Portland is changing similarly to all of Portland. There's a wide range of increasing prices from 7 to 30%, with an average of roughly 14% in 1 year alone in the Portsmouth neighborhood, which increased 14% in 1 year. And of course, the reason I wanted to highlight these numbers is that this was before Northgate was announced as the project site. And so we're seeing roughly from 2016 to 2021 that prices in North Portland neighborhoods increased 22% to 77% with an average of 39%. The Portsmouth neighborhood increased 43% in 5 years. So that information that Claudio shared earlier about the difference between the assessed value and the market value being so wide, here's a great example. I'm going to go to the next. So we're actively mitigating PP&R Bureau is actively mitigating displacement and enhancing affordability and providing services for community through these 4 main service areas: equity and access to amenities, access to programming, and climate resilience, and in contracting. One of the best ways to support anti-displacement is actually the continued work of the PP&R recreational programming and the Portland Parks Levy, which provides vital access to our community centers. The Access Pass and Pay What You Can program allows community members to continue to have access to mental, physical, and social health opportunities to support living well and having wellness in their community and to stay in their community. I'm not going to run through all those bullets, but they're there for your reference. Sorry, I lost my spot. Our planting trees using PSEF dollars to enhance the urban forest in North Portland is also relieving the heat island effect, creating cleaner air, managing stormwater, and providing habitat and purifying water, and allowing people the ability to stay in place with lower air temperatures by creating a higher urban forest to absorb the urban heat island effect. Equity and contracting, something that I'm pretty close to and deal with on a daily basis, is creating skilled job and trade apprenticeships and training positions in the contracting community, implementing the regional workforce equity plan to provide better paying local skilled construction jobs for equity firms, utilizing high numbers of disadvantaged women, minority, emerging small businesses, and service disabled veteran COVID consultants and contractors to provide job opportunities. And back to what Tom said, is one of the biggest strategies to support anti-displacement is the provision of affordable housing and land banking for future affordable housing to foster a stable housing environment. These measures are led by the Portland Housing Bureau and take considerable funding. As the city's parks provider, we can support the Housing Bureau efforts by supporting letters and federal grant applications for future funding. Okay.
Thank you so
Any
much.
questions? That was a record.
We have about 4 minutes left, and so this is an informational report. So if there's any clarifying questions, I'm opening the floor to the board. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Robin, for your presentations. I want to go back to Tom's presentation, if I might, for a minute. I think I I have a couple of thoughts, but only one of them is actually very baked. Michelle, is it possible to get Tom's presentation up? I think one of the things that I've noticed that I wanted to just kind of underscore, I noticed that for the rental housing, okay, let's stop right there. So for the rental housing, so the price point, you know, there is a little bit of variation in the service area being a little bit lower than the Portland area, which is, you know, it's like, because the incomes for that track are a little bit lower, so that seems to track okay. What was troubling to me was the for sale units tracked really very closely to the larger area right there. Thank you. Now, can you go 2 slides back, please? Because one thing that was troubling to me was the income levels. Here you go. 29,000 is 40% less than 48,000. And so you're talking about a humongous affordability gap with respect to, you know, households in that area, you know, notwithstanding the lag of the income situation. But I think that this is a huge concern with respect to households' ability to acquire, to get into home ownership. And I think we need to really invest some thinking there in terms of, you know, how can we support these households who are interested in entering home ownership in a way that will really support them in this community. The other one that is less well baked, I'm glad you brought up the 82nd Avenue situation. Sorry, do you want to respond to that before I?
Just really quickly, we do have 1 minute left before we're at 7 p.m. unless we want to put a motion on the floor to extend the meeting. We're gonna either have to wrap this up with the hope that maybe we can send you some questions and you can answer them, and then we can get it back to the board members, because there might be other folks that have some questions that haven't had a chance to. So those are the 2 options. Extend the meeting if anybody wants to put a motion on the floor for that. Otherwise, we're going to have to wrap it up in the next minute and then send questions to you and hopefully get some feedback.
And I'm happy to connect with Tom offline.
But I think I have the same notes, so I would also love to hear about that, because one is like $800 a month and the other one is like $1,200 a month, which, you know. So.
Do you all have time if we extend the meeting?
I have to go. So maybe I'll follow up.
Coming with me? Aren't you coming with me? I'm not giving you a ride. I thought I was gonna do a ride.
Robin, you have to leave. I remember.
Yeah, Robin's double booked. She has an event at Cathedral Park tonight.
So it sounds like maybe what we need to do is get some questions together, send them on to you, and hopefully I can filter them back out to the board. Unless you have something really quick that you can answer Bonnie on right now.
No, I mean, I think that the gap, the income gap that shows up there versus the home values also is reflected in probably the amount of regulated affordable housing. I'm not really familiar with sort of at what income level that most of those residents are at. Is it 30% housing or 60% AMI housing? But that may be leading to that gap. We don't really have good data tools to really understand what the income levels, for example, what is the income level of the homeowners in that tract itself?
It's not just homeowners, it's also renters, right?
Well, I think, I think what Tom is saying is you can have a hump on the renters that are in the affordable units, and then you have a hump up here of the homeowners. So you've got a double hump situation for your distribution of your household income.
And it's widening over time.
Yep.
You also may have a lot of older homeowners that have been in their house for a long time. We can only sort of tease out so much, and I think that's where a lot of the work that Robin's been doing and the Parks Bureau's been doing around community engagement. That's the other half is listening to the community, learning from their lived experience to get to sort of either confirm the data or be able to better understand what you're seeing in the data and begin to answer some of those questions.
Well,
I think we
again,
did.
thank you so much.
I just wanted to add that I don't know that we pointed it out specifically, but in that same table, there is a fairly high home ownership rate in this area. As
Surprisingly high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that adds to stability, right? The high home ownership rate, the high percentage of regulated affordable, those are ameliorating factors.
So again, I want to thank everybody, and unfortunately, I will have to adjourn at 7:02 PM and expect a lot of questions.
Yeah,
So thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys.